Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Britt Mayer Show. I'm Britt Mayer, and today we are unpacking the cultural battle for life and truth with a powerful guest. You guys loved him last time we had him on. And a quick ask, if these episodes are hitting home, please like, subscribe, and share. This one is one that needs to be shared far and wide. And make sure to check the show notes for links and resources. In today's episode, we trace America's cultural decline back to the early 1900s when revolutionary forces targeted the patriarchy and the family to pave the way for abortion on demand. But hope is rising. The next generation of young men, the Charlie Kirk boys, are embracing tradition, church, biblical manhood, and the fight to restore Christendom and to protect the unborn. We also cover bold new strategies, including extending the 14th Amendment equal protection to preborn children and pushing legislative teeth to finally abolish abortion. My guest is Seth Gruber. He is a lifelong abolitionist when it comes to abortion. He's the host of The Seth Gruber Show. He's the founder of the White Rose Resistance, which is a fast-growing ministry that is awakening the church and equipping believers to resist the culture of death and shake the gates of hell. You guys are going to be in for a lot in this conversation. I'm still reeling from it because we cover so much. It's a great conversation, and it's going to challenge you. Seth is sounding the alarm and calling for a revolution of life. America is quickly approaching her 250th birthday, but what if we don't just celebrate history and instead step boldly into our future? Join us June 5th through 6th in Inglewood, Colorado, just outside of Denver, for the Last Stand Festival. This is a powerful two-day gathering for believers who care deeply about faith, family, and the future of our nation. This year's incredible lineup includes Allie Beth Stuckey, Dr. Frank Turek, Seth Gruber, Victor Marx, Steve Dace, Abby Johnson. This is the event to attend. And huge bonus, you're going to see the world premiere of Seth Gruber's newest film, The Last Stand. This is a weekend to be strengthened, equipped, and reminded that God is still at work in America. So bring your kids, bring your whole church, and invite your friends, and come ready to be refreshed and inspired. Tickets are on sale now. Reserve yours today at thelaststand.com and use code ROOTED for 20% off. We will see you in Colorado June 5th through 6th, 2026. Go grab your tickets now at thelaststand.com. Seth Gruber, it has been officially 17 months since we sat down last time.
It has. Okay.
Isn't that crazy?
Wow, time flies.
Time really flies. I know you were on for, I think, episode 2 of this show, which is
Oh, no
wild.
way.
I know, it's been a while, so
Oh,
I'm
wow.
excited to have you back, and we get to talk about everything that you have been up to since then, because you've been up to a lot, and since the second Trump administration, because we're in a whole different ballgame now since we were last time we talked. The March for Life 2026 just happened, and there's a whole new generation showing up to fight abortion. So welcome back.
Yeah, thank you, Britt. Congrats on the show. Thanks for your bold voice, your relentless pursuit of the truth. It's a breath of fresh air in an age of cynicism and pessimism. And so excited to be back.
Well, let's just jump in. I'd love to ask you just to kick us out of the gate right now on what is happening in the fight for life right now. What are you most closely watching?
Yeah, I mean, everyone was excited when Roe v. Wade got overturned, Britt, right? I mean, I think almost probably every Christian celebrated that. Not progressive Christians, they're not Christians.
Yeah.
But I think probably like everyone celebrated that. It was, I mean, people had been working for this for so long, but the horrific reality is that I think most Christians and even many pro-life leaders and speakers and whatnot weren't actually prepared for it, didn't know what that would actually mean. And a lot of the pro-life movement, just kind of generically, is, I feel like, sort of wallowing and kind of just being tossed about by every new wave and unsure of where they are and like how to move forward. That's not an indictment on the entire movement. There's warriors everywhere, right? Like, but by and large, just speaking in generalities, it seems like a lot of the movement is like, what do we do? Like, what do we believe? How do we end abortion? What is the path forward? Like, how do we actually end this?
Yeah.
And why is it not ending? Even in several super deep red Republican states, Britt, with Republican supermajorities. And so Roe gets overturned the year following that. So that would have been 2023. and then 2024. Those were the first 2 calendar full months following the overturning of Roe. There were more babies being murdered in those 12-month segments than had been murdered in 2021, 2020, 2019, 2018, 2017, 2016, 2015, 2014, 2013, 2012, 2011. That more babies were killed in the first calendar year, that 12 months, and then the following 12 months, than had been killed at any annualized rate for a decade leading up to the overturning of Roe versus Wade.
Break that down. Why?
Yeah, because people see these headlines
how does
like
that happen?
numbers on the low, babies being saved. What that means is, okay, South Dakota, let's just pick some super red states. South Dakota, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. Okay, let's just throw a few out there. Deep, deep red states. Yeah, they have some of the strongest pro-life laws that are on the books in the country. But with the abortion pill, this deadly baby poisoning thing is just being sent into all 50 states. And then the states that have shut down their surgical abortion centers, which is great, by the way. Like, I'm not here to just be poo-poo. Okay, let's celebrate when good things happen, but we should never be satisfied, right? We should never be okay with more babies being murdered after overturning of Roe than before, and then just pat ourselves on the back and say, well, in some states, we shut down the surgical abortion facilities. Okay, so let's celebrate some good things, but let's be aware of where we're actually at in the movement right now. And so, yeah, so some of these deep red states, they shut down surgical abortion mills. Okay, great. So women or boyfriends who are telling or pressuring or encouraging or whatever, people that want to kill their babies, what they're doing if they're past the abortion pill time frame, right, which is 10 weeks, it used to be 8 weeks, they'll just travel across state lines. So purple states, Britt, and blue states, their numbers are exploding. So does that mean that less babies are being murdered just because some red states' numbers plummeted? No, it just means a ton of those women are traveling across state lines, or they're getting the abortion pill, and we don't even know how to track that. We do not know how to track that. Now, you can get generic numbers, Britt, right? Obviously, like the federal government reports some, Guttmacher Institute, Planned Parenthood Statistical Research Branch. There's some reporting on, what percentage of the babies being killed every 12 months in America are solely from the mifepristone, misoprostol abortion pill regimen. And so we have some numbers, but we know that they're more. We know that they're more because there's no accurate way to track it. And so let me be very clear. Every super deep red state that has passed even conception, even bans on abortion from the beginning, abortion is legal in all 50 states. Whoa, Seth, fake news. That's not true. What are you talking about? That's because every piece of pro-life legislation, even in deep red states, specifically have exemptions for the aborting mother. She cannot be punished. She cannot be prosecuted. She cannot face any consequences for killing her baby after it has already been declared illegal in the state she lives in one of these deep red states. And the reason for this is because much of, not all of, tides are shifting. We're winning the argument, Britt. We'll get into it. But much of the pro-life movement opposes aborting mothers facing any legal consequences. Now, what this means is that you'll never end abortion. That's what that means. Listen, I don't want to throw women in jail, Britt. I don't want to see women have to, God forbid, get the death penalty. I don't want to see a woman go to jail for the rest of her life. Guess what I want to see? I want to see a big deterrent against baby murder so that women who I hold in high regard, I believe women are free moral agents, that they have moral accountability. And I believe that deep down, a lot of women, not all, but I think most women deep down kind of know that it's not a blob of tissue. And I think that God's given them a rational nature, just like men have. And that when faced with the consequences of things that they don't want to have to go through, will choose to not murder their baby. They will choose to obey the law. Praise God. The Lord has given us the law. The Paul says that the law is a school teacher that points us to Christ. Aristotle says that statecraft is soulcraft. Anthony Breitbart said that politics is downstream of culture, but sometimes we forget culture is also downstream of politics. That actually through lawmaking, through statecraft, we also create culture. This is one of the things the conservative movement has forgotten in recent years. The ancients of the past would have taken this for granted, Britt, but we've forgotten this in recent years. When you pass laws, you are creating culture. That is culture making. For example, what's a great example of this? East and West Germany is a great example of this, Britt. In East Germany to this day, did you know that East Germany is over 50% atheist, while West Germany is only 10% atheist? So what explains that? Is that like a culture thing? Is that like regional variations in bratwursts? Is that why you have a huge disparity in religiosity? No, it's because the East Germany government was officially dominated by an officially atheistic Soviet communist regime that made it its goal to stamp out Christianity. And that had, wait for it, cultural effects. So that's an example of politics creating and impacting culture. Roe v. Wade is another one. Babies were being murdered at about 100,000 a year, median, in the late 60s, Britt. In 74, 75, 76, the first 3 years after Roe, we were murdering 1.6 million babies every year. Well, that's a culture thing. And what changed? The Supreme Court. A political decision called Roe versus Wade. We could do this all day. We could do this for the whole podcast if you wanted, Britt. So statecraft creates culture. It builds the moral conscience of a people by prescribing what is good and bad, true and false, evil and good. The law, the state is actually creating the cultural consciousness. And so when we say it's so bad to kill babies that if you're an abortionist, we're going to throw you in jail. We're going to shut down your surgical abortion facility. That if you as the boyfriend slip mifepristone, the first regimen of the abortion pill, into your girlfriend's water over dinner one night in downtown Oklahoma City, and that baby dies, you're going to jail. As the boyfriend. But if she orders the abortion pill online, she slips it into her own drink on the same night, on the same date night, over the same dinner in the same city, she's a victim and should face no legal consequences for murdering her baby. How is this consistent? So most of the pro-life movement totally is currently, actively, right now, Britt, working against laws that, if passed, would simply give unborn babies the same legal protection that infants already have.
Okay, so that's where I want to put a linchpin on that, because this is part of the whole strategy, right? Of how do we get rid of abortion? How do we make it so that you can't kill babies anymore in America? So I want to put a pin in what you're saying. So if I'm hearing you right, you're saying that there has to be downstream from politics punishment enacted against women who choose to go kill their babies.
Yeah, of course. Now,
okay, so tease that out. What does that look like? And do we ever even get to a place where that is realized, really, in America?
Well, just in recent weeks, Britt, there was a equal rights protection bill in South Dakota that got more support for that kind of bill than we've seen in various red states in a long time. We were close to getting it through assembly. One of the reasons it died was because South Dakota Right to Life and other pro-life groups joined the ACLU, sitting on the same side of the court or the legislature for visitors to sit to oppose the bill.
Oh, okay, but that's where I want clarity, because something doesn't make sense. So why would these quote unquote pro-life groups and other organizations that would propose to be pro-life, pro-baby, why would they be against this legislation that would protect babies and punish those who kill babies?
Great question. Maybe you could tell me. I mean, I know the reasons they give, and I'll tell you. But it's frustrating, right? It makes you want to pull your hair out. So here is a very popular talking point. This is the answer to your question, or the beginning of it. Here's the talking point that I've heard for years in the pro-life movement that maybe in my teenage years I kind of agreed with. I still kind of agree with today because there's a kernel of truth to it. But they take that kernel of truth to what I believe is a heinous and unjustifiable conclusion, okay? And here's the statement. Women are the second victim of the abortion industry. Women are the second victims. And so who's the first victim? Well, the baby, who's emaciated, mutilated, and dissected, and their organs sold to the highest bidder. Okay, so that's clearly the murdered baby is the first victim. And then they say the woman is the second victim. And there's no nuance to that. There's rarely recognition of all the TikTok and Instagram videos I see of women celebrating and making a little Instagram reel party about their trip to the abortion mill. There's no recognition of all the women that we run into, Britt, because we have resistance chapters all around the country with Christians outside of abortion mills every day, of women saying, hell yeah, I'm going to effing kill this effing little bit of effing this and a fetus cake and delete a fetus. And hell yeah, it's a baby, this little motherfucking thing I'm going to kill. It's like we see these women all the time outside of abortion centers, Britt. Like, are they victims? Like, something tells me they're not victims when this woman's screaming in one of my team members' face saying, like, that she loves abortion and she loves killing babies. And this is a baby and she's going to go kill it. Like, how? I'm sorry. I don't understand how that woman's a victim. But have women been, and do they continue to be victims of the abortion industry? So here's where it gets interesting and complicated. Sure, Britt.
Okay, but first I think words matter. So when you're saying victim, what is the definition of a woman is the second victim? What do they mean when they say that?
What they mean by that is that, like, the culture has been lying to women and the next generation for decades about
saying
the
that
status.
it's just a clump of cells.
Yeah, of the unborn child. The media celebrates it and normalizes it. University professors celebrate it and indoctrinate young women into
so here's my
believing
question
this is empowerment.
then. This is important. Based on that, you know more than I do about culturally, where are we at right now with women actually believing that it's just a clump of cells? Like the generation who is doing the abortions, killing the babies, like you got your teen 20s, do they buy into that it's just a clump of cells? Is that the general held belief, or have we shifted into the science that says that upon conception it's life?
Right.
Because is there any truth to these women truly are victims? They don't know. They, like, majority just go and get an abortion to have, what is the data?
I feel like
where are we at with
you
trends?
see stories across the board, Britt. That's why it's difficult to answer. So, like, I know women who lead incredible post-abortion healing ministries, right? And they work with post-abortive mothers and fathers. And so I hear the stories of, like, you know, all these women I'm working with, most of them took the abortion pill. It was at 6 weeks, 7 weeks. They were told that it was pregnancy tissue at this point, that it would be like a heavy period. They took it. And Seth, they're calling me on the phone, screaming, saying there's a baby in my toilet. I had no idea. So what do I say to that? Do I say, no, all those women are lying to you? I mean, I guess I just have to take their word for it.
Right.
But then there's tons of women, Britt, that we see, that we talk to, that we run into at rallies and protests and outside of abortion mills, where you're like, not only do you fully acknowledge and admit that this is a baby, but you get off on killing that baby. You're gleefully celebrating the murder of what you're calling a baby. So I don't know if I could tell you, Britt, and I've thought about this a lot. I don't know how to break that down. Like, what are the percentages?
Yeah, like the trends of the younger
who are
generation.
honestly being saying that they were ignorant, didn't know.
Sure.
And those who were saying it's a baby and I don't effing care. But that's kind of actually beside the point, Britt, because that's sort of surface level. Let's, like, go maybe a few layers deeper.
Yeah,
okay?
but let me just go real quick and hold that thread for a second, because I do want to put that in the needle. So my question is, how do you thread that needle with what you're talking about with the girls that are on the sidewalk yelling at your guys that they're gonna kill a baby and eat it for lunch, which I hear. I've seen the TikToks. It's a whole thing. Versus the stories that you hear from those who minister post-abortion are like they thought it was gonna be like and it's a baby.
So let's start there, Britt. I have asked I have asked many post-abortive women this question. They're friends of mine. Like, they're pro-life warriors. Like, they're wonderful. They lead great ministries. It's wonderful. But because I'm close enough to some of these warrior women for the unborn who did kill their baby before they were walking with Christ, I've asked so many of these women, Britt, if abortion was illegal and a crime when you got your abortion, would you have done it? I bet you can't guess what 100% of the women I've asked that question to have said. No. 100% of them have said, not only no, they've said no way. If it was a crime, it was against not just like on paper, but it was a crime and I could, like, go to jail, There's no way I would have ever gotten the abortion that I got. To which I have said in 100% of cases, Britt, praise Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Praise Jesus for the law. Wait, are you telling me that the law would have been a blessing in your life? That if Christians had been courageously involved in our political system, in our republic, and had been passing and upholding righteous legislation that created deterrence to doing evil things like killing unborn babies in the womb, you're telling me you wouldn't have even thought about getting an abortion? Not only would your child be standing right next to you right now, but you would have been spared decades of pain and trauma
Mm-hmm.
from something that you just told me changed your life? Praise God for the law. So listen, like most women will obey the law, just like most men, when there's serious deterrence to bad things, will obey the law.
Right. So what you're suggesting is that morality without teeth, law without teeth
Yeah, of
is
course.
useless. So it's
Yeah.
if I'm driving on a freeway and there's a cop and I know that I'm going to get pulled over if I'm going 95, I'm going to slow down. But if there's no teeth, there's no punishment. I just keep cruising at 95
Why,
because it
why
doesn't
is
matter,
this any
right?
different than how we raise kids, Britt?
Yes. So
Hey,
what
son, don't do that. But hey, by the way, if you do, nothing happens.
exactly?
Oh, okay. I mean,
Okay,
like, this
so
is not complicated. It
let me put
shouldn't
you
be.
on the spot then, because and we weren't even going to go here, but I love where this is going because I think it's really important and it's not a conversation that a lot of people are willing to have. But if we know that abortion is the intentional killing of a life, then what is the equal teeth, the punishment to that? As a Christian mom right here in California, I refuse to be silent about the evil that is happening in our own backyard. Human trafficking, especially sex trafficking, is not just an overseas problem. It is right here every single day in every state, and it is exploding in our own communities. Right now, vulnerable women and children, our daughters, our neighbors' kids, are being exploited through the very devices in our home. Pimps and predators use social media, apps, and the internet to groom and trap them. An estimated 27 million people worldwide are enslaved, with millions in sex trafficking, and a huge portion right here in America. This $150 billion criminal industry preys on the innocent. That's why Operation Love Global is laser focused this year on prevention and rescue right here at home in the USA. They are running proven digital safety workshops to equip parents, teens, churches, and schools with real tools to spot dangers online and keep kids safe. They are partnering with trusted nonprofits to provide direct care for survivors. Operation Love Global needs you to stand with them to help end this evil. Donate today to fund these workshops, survivor outreaches, and partnerships. Your gift, monthly or one time, multiplies the impact, and it honestly saves lives. Go to operationloveglobal.org to donate. Any amount helps support this critical mission to see justice and healing fulfilled. We can't afford silence. Go to operationloveglobal.org for more information.
Right. So one of the glorious things about our republic and the way that this form of government is built, Britt, is that it does allow for nuance, for gray areas, and it does allow for mercy, right? Like juries often show mercy based off of the context of the individual, the crime, the various factors that were involved in this individual's crime. That's a beautiful thing. And one of the things that happens with any kind of crime, with any kind of jury, with any kind of prosecution against a certain crime is that there is an examination as to the knowledge of the individual, and it's and their relation to the act committed. Unintentional manslaughter is treated very differently than murder, for example. In each case, you have a dead person, but unintentional is very different than intentional. And a lot of this is based off of just kind of your knowledge going into it. And so when we say equal rights protection for the unborn, when we say that the laws that protect infants should be applied to the unborn, does that mean that if we get one of those states passed in North Dakota, South Carolina, Arkansas, Oklahoma, or something, does that mean that that any woman who gets an abortion after it is a crime is going to go to the gallows? Does that mean she's going to get lethal injection? Does that mean she's going to get life in prison? Probably not. You think there's a jury in this country, Brittany, who would give a
No.
20-year-old sophomore at San Diego State University 50 years in prison
Certainly not in
for getting a
California. It's not
medication
happening.
abortion?
No.
There's no
No.
way. But frankly, that wouldn't even happen in Oklahoma. Okay, there's not a jury that would do that. They would probably want to show her mercy because we just passed this. This is new. People are getting used to this. But there does have to be penalties. And there are some states in this country where there's a minimum prosecution punishment for homicide. I think Idaho has this. I think they're bringing back the firing line. And so there are some states where White Rose, my ministry, would be very kind of just careful in the kind of legislation that we support, because I don't think it would necessarily be just to have a one-size-fits-all punishment for a woman who gets an abortion after it's been labeled a crime, because of many different factors, by the way. Are we going to do that with a minor? Are we going to do that with a boyfriend who was violent and threatening her? Are we going to do that with a father who was coercing his freshman 18-year-old daughter? There's many women choose abortion just because they want it. Right? Like many women, they just don't want to be pregnant, so they kill the baby. But there are, of course, circumstances, and you can get some of the stats from Guttmacher Institute. There are instances where women report a certain level of coercion. Now, it's hard to define coercion, right? Does that mean like the boyfriend says, if you don't kill the baby,
I'm going to leave you.
I'm going to leave you. Like some women would call that coercion. I would say coercion is like violence, like threatening real, like, okay, like this woman's
If you
afraid.
don't, then,
Yeah. So it's hard to define that, but we know that sometimes many women report a certain level of coercion. So should she go to jail for life? Probably not, right? So there is no one size fits all. And that's the beauty of our form of government, is that like you have lawyers, you have a jury, you have search and discovery, you have argumentation, you get a whole picture of the whole scenario. So in most states in this country, even if we got one of these bills passed, it's not a one-size-fits-all punishment, just like women who, I mean, you see these stories, right? I think we get one once a year. I see one of these in America of a mom who gave birth to an infant and threw it in the trash can.
Yeah.
Are any of those women getting the death penalty? Nope. None of those women have gotten the death penalty. Okay. So if women aren't getting the death penalty for murdering infants already born, no jury in this country is going to give the death penalty to a woman who kills her unborn baby. But what we're simply saying with these laws we're supporting, Brittany, is like, whatever laws protect the infant, apply those to unborn babies. And as it stands right now, there's not a red state in this country, Britt, that has done that. Every red state that celebrates their pro-life laws have exemptions written into the legislation saying that the aborting mother can face no consequences for killing her baby. So as it stands, a mother can kill her baby with legal immunity and legal impunity in all 50 states for any reason or no reason at all, as long as she does it to herself. Now, one thing on the victim thing, Brett, like, listen, are some women victims? Sure. Are most young men victims? Yes. We live in a pornified, post-Christian, bonkers, sick society, Brett. If we want to go down this whole victim, who's a victim, we could do that for the next 10 years.
Right.
We're all victims of our society. Why? Because of sin. We're all victims to some extent. I'm happy to acknowledge that. You know who else are often victims? Pedophiles. Did you know most pedophiles were themselves sexually abused? So if we're going to apply what is currently a lot of the pro-life movement's perspective on this to the pedophile debate, same moral principle, then we would have to say, and of course I don't believe this, we would have to say that men who are anally raping 10-year-old boys, if they were sexually abused as a child, they should face no legal consequences for anally raping 10-year-olds. Show me a leader in the pro-life space who would support that. Yeah, none of them. That's the problem with this country. That's the problem with the conservative movement in this church, church, Britt, is that we have more anger over pedophilia than we do baby murder. How about they're both wrong and bad? And that we can acknowledge that you might be a victim in some way, shape, or form. Sure, you're butch, bald, ugly, lesbian, feminist dance theory professor who convinced you it was a blob of tissue. Sure, you're a victim. Does that mean that you should face no consequences for murdering a baby after it has been made illegal? No, you don't get off just because you were a quote-unquote victim any more than a 40-year-old man anally raping a 10-year-old should get off because he was raped at 10. Okay, we have to be consistent here. And so that's sort of the problem in this whole space right now is that what we're doing We're misidentifying the real victim. And the baby in the womb has the dignity and the value and the right to life of any infant. And therefore, the same laws that protect infants should be granted and applied to the unborn. It's really
Okay,
that simple.
I want to stick a stake in this and connect it to Epstein, because everything you're talking about with like pedophilia,
Sure,
with the
yeah.
horror, with the outrage of the Epstein list, who's on the Epstein, all of that, right? We see a huge lack of that when it comes to abortion, which we know has slaughtered millions of babies, right? But I hear it with the Epstein list. It's they're eating babies, they're draining baby blood. There's all, all the baby talk with the Epstein list. So why do we have so much horror and want to talk about the Epstein list, which obviously is atrocious, the stuff that we see there, the darkest pits of hell with everything connected to Epstein. But then abortion, no one bats an eye. We have TikTokers making videos about the abortion they just got or they're going to get.
Yeah.
So what is the disconnect there, and why do we hear the outrage from Christians when it comes to Epstein, but abortion, is just
Yeah, here's the answer, Britt. If murdering babies is healthcare, then selling them is just capitalism, I guess. You dehumanize life at one stage, you'll dehumanize it at another. You objectify it at one age, you'll commodify it as another. Like we could spend an hour. This is most of what I do in my writing, speaking, and my films, Britt, is to connect all the pieces. How is this related to that? Which is
right.
kind of what you're getting at.
Yep.
But like, listen, until abortion is ended in this country and little babies are protected, there can be no peace in this country. We may have many more days, but they will be fraught with trouble and chaos. And there are many reasons for this, but the foremost is fundamentally spiritual. Like we have been feeding our most vulnerable to Lucifer, and his minions, and the codification of that bloodshed has brought America into partnership with dark forces. Declaring open season on babies was an open invitation to demons. And the more babies that are destroyed, the more ravenous these dark forces become. Their bloodlust is one that can never be satiated. And because spiritual principalities are in fact real, America's partnership with Moloch
Yep.
never stopped there. Give demons an inch, they'll take a mile, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And the more babies that are murdered, the more dark our country's soul becomes. And the longer we make peace with the slaughter of children, the more Satan and his forces advance. Notice this, Brett. This is super important. Notice how the rights and safety of infants, toddlers, and children are more endangered now and more openly questioned by others than at any other time in our nation's history. Notice that? Why? Why? Because demons long for bigger and more interesting prey. They want a meal they can play with before devouring it. And our leaders are growing increasingly comfortable with attacking and destroying children's rights this side of the womb. A nation that cannot say, this is a baby and he deserves protection, will soon be unable to say, this is a child and she deserves protection. So there is an invisible war. There always has been, but it manifests in the cultural and political landscape. And for all of human history, Britt, the murder and sacrifice of babies was a fundamentally spiritual act.
Yep.
Only in recent memory, when the modern world imagines that it has outgrown religion, has abortion been reimagined as a neutral and secular act. And Lucifer couldn't be happier, Britt. The Lord of Flies is just as satisfied with babies sacrificed in his name as babies sacrificed in the name of science, self, family, or career well-being. Makes no difference to him. He devours them all. But that invisible war has visible consequences. Biblical history is very clear on this. And this is a lot of what my next film and book is about. It's called The Last Stand. Nations that sacrificed babies did not prevail. Unable to protect the future, they were unable to protect the present. Committed to destroying their posterity, they ended up destroying themselves. And other nations took them over. God routinely gave his own people over to pagan hordes because of the baby killing thing and the weird sex cult thing. This is maybe why this is a powerful line from a founder, Brittany. This is perhaps why George Mason, the father of the Bill of Rights, said, as nations cannot be rewarded or punished in the next world, so they must be in this. By an inevitable chain of causes and effects, providence punishes national sins by national calamities. And we have been on the precipice of national calamities for some time now, Britt. Are we already off the cultural cliff? I don't think so. I think there's still hope, but we're awfully close. And history is not unclear on this point, that nations that murder their own children eventually die by suicide. And so the best thing that we can do, in my opinion, to save this republic, and save her we should, is to abolish abortion once and for all. Let Aslan get the glory and our inheritance the blessings.
You swim in the dates and the history. So I want to ask you this just based off of everything you just said. Can you take us through? I would love actually for you to sit with us in this for a minute. Take us through from the beginning of this republic, the inception of America. Abortion was not allowed. It was actually illegal. Then you have a whole time period where things begin to shift, and then abortion, bam, hits the scene and it's legalized. And then we see a whole lot of fallout after that when it comes to marriage, when it comes to gender bending ideology. Now we have the whole trans movement where men are given super rights over women because they pretend to be a woman. Do you see a connection with all of that you can pull back to the worship of Moloch through the sacrifice of our innocence? Have you pulled that all together in a timeline?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay, walk us through that. I think that would be great for the audience to hear, because sometimes all of these things can seem so disconnected and that there's just so much evil and it's just all over and you can't really put it all in a puzzle together. But I think it would be helpful to line it up so people can see what you're talking about, is how this is all downstream of us giving up Christ for demonic worship.
Yeah, totally. I mean, all human conflict is ultimately theological. Really what you asked should take like a 90-minute podcast, but I made a film and book for people. It's called The 1916 Project. It starts to scratch that surface. The next film and book, well, the book is called The Last Stand, Christ or Chaos, The War for the West. And then the film is also called The Last Stand. That gets released on June 5th and 6th at the Last Stand Festival in Denver. But that next book goes even deeper, to answer your question. So with the time that we do have, I'll try to condense it. There is a not coincidental lining up between the retreat of the church in the early 20th century with the most bloodiest century in human history. More human beings, innocent human beings, were murdered in the 20th century, Britt, than in all of human history before the year 1900 combined. Right now, in 2026, I'm talking worldwide numbers. Okay, like more innocent human beings were killed around the world between the year 1900 and 2000 than had been killed in all of human history before the year 1900 combined. And they have the gall, Britt, to tell us that Christian nationalism is the great threat to our republic. Oh, what pathetic load of horse manure! And even when they like to talk about the Crusades, right. Christians murdering people, they have absolutely no idea about radical Islamism or any of the history behind the Crusades, by the way. But even those who died because of wars of religion, those numbers pale in comparison to what? The doctrines of Darwinism, neo-Malthusianism, and eugenics by the secular humanists in the late 19th and 20th century. pales in comparison. So what's really a threat to our democracy and freedom? It ain't Christian nationalism, let me tell you that. Yeah, you want to know what built America? Christian nationalism built America. Okay, like we're so stupid about our history. This is where you started, right? So I'll just start there. Like, oh my gosh, Britt Mayer and Seth Gruber are Christian nationalists saying that women shouldn't vote and that only Christians should be able to vote. By the way, the history behind that's super fascinating. It wasn't a sexist thing. It was that, did you know, Britt, most females oppose suffrage? Did you know
No, I didn't know that, and
most
I'm
females, you can have me on, we'll do this one next time,
yeah,
okay?
I
But
would
most
love that.
females oppose suffrage, and it wasn't because they hated their own sex,
No.
but because they were recognizing the attempt from feminists. That's right. Sorry, y'all. Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton were not good people.
Mhm.
Did you know Stanton wrote the first feminist Bible to remove gendered language? Okay, so
Hmm.
they were all pagans. They were not conservatives. They were radicals. They were revolutionaries. And most women, just moms and sisters and daughters, opposed the suffrage movement because they recognized the attempt from revolutionaries to shift the republic from a family-centric model to individualism,
Hmm.
radical individualism. Because at that time, most women were thinking, why do I need to vote? Me and my husband are one flesh. He's the head of the household. Of course, we agree on spiritual and political matters. So his vote is our family voting.
Yep. Mhm.
It
Yeah.
wasn't a sexist thing. And then
Mhm.
plus you had to own land, so you had a vested interest in the future. You had to have children
Mhm.
and own land to say, when I vote, I'm doing it with a recognition that, like, I got these people in
Yeah,
this
it's not a
land.
throwaway.
Yeah. So it wasn't a sexist thing, but there's no recognition of that anymore. And in the early colonies, by the way, Brett, there were multiple colonies in this country and early states where, watch this, if you wanted to run for public office, you had to prove your membership at a local Protestant church before you could appear on the ballot. That is Christian nationalism. Okay,
Wow.
now how did the 20th century become so bloody? In the early 20th century, with the fundamentalist modernist crisis, the church starts to retreat from the public square. This was the first iteration, Brittany, of I don't do politics, I just do Jesus. And the
Yes.
early fundamentalists, their heart was in the right place. Don't get me wrong. Ockenga and Carl F. Henry, and then later Billy Graham, their heart was in the right place. There was a lot of heresy going on in the early 20th century. A lot of they were the sojourners. They were the Jim Wallaces. They were the progressive pagans, wearing Christianity like a skin suit.
Hmm.
And the fundamentalists, trying to protect orthodoxy, chose to focus on the fundamentals, just preaching the fundamentals, preaching
Mhm.
orthodoxy verse by verse. But what that ended up resulting in was a retreat from the culture war and the political war. And so the progressives who pervert Christianity and wear its corpse, they rush into the political and cultural fights, and the Christians kind of retreat. And I'm just saying it's not a coincidence that the bloodiest century in human history coincidentally lines up with the retreat of the church, which was a relatively foreign thing to the 1900 years of church history before that, okay? And then what else is going on in this whole era in the early 20th century? The eugenics movement is taking off. Darwin's book comes in the 1860s. His cousin coins the term eugenics and becomes the modern father of the eugenics movement. He then mentors Havelock Ellis, who was the Alfred Kinsey of
Mhm.
England.
Mhm.
Havelock Ellis hosted orgies in his home. He forced his wife to watch him as he participated in these entanglements. And he starts an affair with a young woman who's fleeing Greenwich Village in 1914 because she was distributing illegal, obscene articles, illegal birth control methods to neighborhoods throughout New York City. And so she flees to avoid the law, and she becomes the first Kamala Harris. She sleeps her way up the levers of political
Oh
power
gosh.
in
Okay.
England, and she jumps into bed with Havelock Ellis, who is at that moment literally being mentored by Darwin's cousin, okay, the
Okay, and
father of
that's
the
Francis Galton.
Francis
Francis
Galton. Yeah,
Galton.
thank you.
There you
Yeah,
go.
so yeah, Galton coins the term eugenics. He says he's inspired by Darwin's book, The Origin of Species, and Galton begins to apply Darwin's principles to human beings before Darwin does, which is fascinating. Darwin later writes The Descent of Man,
Yep.
and that's where he overtly applies Darwinian observations to the human gene pool. But his cousin Galton had already done that and had already seen how that provides the most brilliant strategical assault against the foundations of Christendom, the sanctity of life, the human exceptionalism.
If you are anything like me, you are so tired of companies that continually push woke nonsense, and you are actively looking for companies that are patriotic. So enter Resistance Candles. They are hand-poured candles right here in the USA by true patriots who stand for liberty and tradition. They've got an amazing collection. I burn them all the time, and their newest release is Liberal Tears. It's a perfect mix of salty liberal tears and bitter black coffee beans. Can you smell it now? They are premium wax blends with a clean burn. They are long-lasting, and they are loaded with defiant freedom energy. These make an ideal gift, one for you, and buy several to pass along to fellow patriots this year. So head to resistancecandles.com and use code RootedWings for your exclusive discount, because supporting American-made should come with perks. Go grab those Liberal Tears candles now at resistancecandles.com. So you have the revolutionaries coming in as the church is vacating, which I see as culture always needs a conscience. So if the church is pulling out of culture...
nature abhors a vacuum.
Right, nature abhors a vacuum. So if you have the church willingly pulling out, because they're like, we're going to just focus on doctrine because there's heresy, so we're pulling out of all the cultural stuff, well, then nature abhors the vacuum. So it's filled with a new conscience, which is not going to be Christ. Christ is backed out, right? He's been pulled out of the ecclesia. So now you have all these revolutionaries pouring in, and we're in the early 20th century.
The thing is there's a lot of organizations that get launched in the early 20th century in the first 25 years of for between 1900 and 1925. There's a lot of initiatives. There's a lot of filth, and a lot of it's being funded by the Rockefellers, the Fords, and the Carnegies. By the way, the Rockefellers, the Fords, and the Carnegies. They're the Bill Gates of that era in terms of the filth that they fund. Okay, George Soros is of the era. And so a lot of this happens, interestingly, in New York City, which is another weird thing. Like the Greenwich Village, right, where like the show Friends is supposed to take place. That's where you get the Stonewall movement. That's the first like radical homosexuality campaign, right? Not just like let us like have anal sex in the privacy of our own bedrooms.
Yeah, that was a whole different thing.
But the Stonewall movement's like, no, cultural acceptance. Okay, celebration, right? That's launched out of Greenwich Village. What else is launched out of Greenwich Village? Second wave feminism. Which, again, all feminism's bad. Okay, it just gets worse by degrees, guys. But second wave feminism with folks like Kate Millett, who, interestingly enough, Mallory Millett, her sister, ends up becoming a Catholic, becomes an anti-feminist crusader for the rest of her life, and blows the whistle on all of her sister's absolutely communist, orgiastic, AIDS, demonic like obsessions. So we have all these like inside stories of like
it makes for a great family dinners.
Beliefs.
You've got really good family reunions.
And so
there.
like Mallory tells a story about how she was going to a gathering in Greenwich Village right around the time that NOW was launched. So there's many organizations whose threads we could trace, Britt, but one of them is a national organization for women. You guys know this exists today. It's called NOW, N-O-W. It was established by Kate Millett. Mallory goes to this gathering, okay? And she describes it as a Maoist, Marxist struggle session mimicking religious practice. Have you heard this story?
Yeah,
okay,
I have.
Most people haven't heard it.
No, but I love it. I think you should share it because it's stuff the audience should know.
And there's like 12 women there or something. And at this point, like her sister's already starting to look ugly. But the reason for that, Britt, is that feminism, like feminists are usually ugly. And then there's always a few exceptions, but even Satan masquerades as an angel of light. So I'm speaking in general rules. Most feminists are ugly.
People are either liking or disliking right now.
Yeah, well, actually, and most pro-abortion queens and like Planned Parenthood escorts, they're usually fat and ugly.
Yeah.
But even if they have like rock hard abs, they're still ugly. And the reason for that's actually theological. For the people who don't like this podcast, that's theological. And if you disagree with me, you can take it up with the Bible. The Bible teaches that you take on the image of the thing that you worship.
It is true.
In the Old Testament, it says those who worship idols are like them. And so are all who put their trust in them. And then in the New Testament, it talks about us as Christians. And what does it say, Britt? It says, and all of us with unveiled faces, beholding the glory of the Father, being transformed from one image to another. So what does the Old and New Testament teach? What's the common denominator?
We are the reflection of who we worship.
You take on the image of the thing that you worship. You start to look like the thing that you worship.
Mhm.
So when you worship gender-bending Ashtoreth, cut off your penis and
Yeah.
say you're a woman gods, yeah, you don't turn out too pretty.
Mhm.
Look at all the actresses, right, who have decided in Hollywood that they want to become men. They all
Mhm.
look
Yeah,
so
it's so sad.
horrifically ugly years later. Why? It's a theological phenomenon, guys. Okay, so right as Kate Millett is starting to look ugly, Mallory goes to this gathering in Greenwich Village, and Mallory says that the chairwoman said, "Why are we here?" And all the women said, "To make revolution."
Mm.
And the chairwoman said, "What kind of revolution?" And the lady said, "The cultural revolution." And the chairwoman said, "And how do we make cultural revolution?" And they said, "By destroying the American family." And the chairwoman said, "And how do we do that?" And they said, "Well, by destroying the American patriarch." And the chairwoman said, "And how do we destroy the American patriarch?" And the two women said, "By taking away his power." And the chairwoman said, "And how do we take away his power?" And they said, "By destroying monogamy." And the chairwoman said, "And how do we destroy monogamy?" And the lady said, "By promoting eroticism, prostitution, homosexuality, and abortion." They resounded. So this is not like red meat for the base. It's not a way to rile you up into a frenzy to write large checks to my ministry, the White Rose Resistance. It's to make the observation that Maya Angelou is like a broken clock and gets things right twice a day. When she said, when someone tells you who they are, just believe them.
Mhm.
Why do we sense that most of the most demonic manifestations of our culture war, Britt, have to deal with children and the family? Because they're telling us that. Because they're telling us that they recognize that the strength of America is the strength of the family. And the strength of the family is the strength of the father, the American patriarch. And the strength of the father and his power is funneled through and protected by monogamy.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, it's just like Genesis 1.
Mhm.
Like, are you kidding me? Of course, like, guys, wake up. Like, all of this is spiritual. And so part of the answer to your question, although we're like quite a ways from it, but it's all connected actually,
No, it is
is
connected.
all of the feminist kookies and all of the eugenicists and all
Mhm.
of the progressives in the early 20th century, all of the neo-Malthusians, all of the sexual cult liberationists,
Yeah.
all of the romantics. Remember the romantics, like right after Napoleon? Those are your first hipsters. Like, oh, listen to my slam poetry, dude. I'm just authentically expressing myself. Like all this like bull crap. That's Lord Byron. That's William
Uh,
Godwin. That's Percy Shelley. That's Mary
Mary
Shelley, who
Shelley.
writes Frankenstein
Frankenstein.
at like 22 years
Yeah.
old. She writes it or something like that.
She's an
Which
interesting case
which
study.
Frankenstein is actually like well, you need to have Rosaria Butterfield on. That's her dissertation is on Mary Shelley and Frankenstein.
Oh, I need to get her to talk
Oh,
through that.
Rosaria, we're
Yeah.
about to release an episode. Well, when you air this, it might already be on the Seth Gruber show. But anyways, so those are the first like, oh look, I put a urinal and I duct taped a banana on the wall. Do you want to buy my art? So that's where that begins. Those are the romantics. So all the people I just described, guess what is a super fascinating and for the Christian, not at all surprising aspect of all of those people? An obsession with rewriting the Genesis narrative. An obsession with rewriting the creation account. With Lucifer, with Adam, and with Eve, and with God. All of them were obsessed with reimagining this. Way before Saul Alinsky, Britt, dedicated Rules for Radicals to Lucifer. Way before that, all of these people had an obsession with this. Now, why? My friend Carrie Grass makes this really interesting observation. She says that the romantics, and meaning the hipster leftist progressives, she said they understood that in order to rewrite culture as we know it, one had to go back to the origins of culture and rewrite that.
Hmm.
Well, what's the origins of culture? Well, it's Genesis 1. I
Right.
mean, and so like Percy Shelley, for example, right? He has a whole poem where Lucifer comes as the liberator
Mhm.
and Jesus is the oppressive like meanie.
Yeah. Mhm.
And he helps liberate man and woman to be free, completely inverts the creation account where God is first and then man, and then woman, and then the creatures that they're called to steward over. Completely flips it. You see this with Marx, you see this with Freud, you see this with Kinsey, you see this with Sanger. Tons of these people had connections to the occult. Not all of them were like literally in the occult, but all of them had connections to it. And you start to realize, oh, okay, that's right. Like you cannot lay siege to the foundations of Western civilization and remake the family as we know it in America without dealing with Christianity. You can't. Because they're inseparable. Before we called Western civilization, we used to call it Christendom. And then somewhere in the 20th century,
We kicked that out.
lesbian, fat
Yep.
and ugly, butch, bald professors who had to teach courses on Western Civ didn't like having to use a phrase to describe Western civilization that had the Savior's name in it. Christendom. Everyone called Western civilization Christendom, Britt, until like somewhere in the early mid 20th century, where they're like, we're not going to call it that because then we have to say the name of Christ. Like demons who like are afraid to just say the name, so they have to rebrand it as Western civilization. Anyways, it's a sort of weird frustration of mine. So that's the important thing to remember, is that all of these people wanted to fundamentally remake the West,
Right.
and to do that, they always started with the family. Why? Because
Yes.
it's the most powerful way to transmit the faith to the next generation. It's the smallest political unit. Strong families always result in a small state or a limited state. Broken families, moral chaos, sexual and moral chaos, has always been the seedbed of tyranny. And so by creating chaos sexually and familially, culturally, that has always gone hand in hand with a stronger, larger, more powerful, and dictatorial state. And so one of the ways for the left to accrue enough political power to fundamentally redefine society as we know it is to encourage moral and sexual chaos.
It actually is fascinating, and we need to do a long form of having you walk us through the history, because there's so much there with Kinsey, with Dr. Money, with transgenderism. I read Jonathan Cahn's Return of the Gods, and my eyes were wide open.
Well, we didn't even get into how the early 20th century, additionally, Britt, is where Marxism comes back wearing a different suit. Because capitalism had just been too successful in freeing the proletariat, in helping them thrive financially. It's hard to convince the proletariat that they're oppressed by the crooked capitalist fat cats when the proletariat are thriving and doing so well. And so Marxism as an economic theory utterly failed in the 19th century, certainly after the revolutions of 1848. And so the disciples of Marx got together in the early 20th century, right? Back to where a lot of this chaos starts. And we can trace it. I mean, we can trace it to Rousseau. We could trace it back to like Voltaire. We could trace it back to Leviathan. I mean, we could trace it way back, but certainly in lot
America,
of it starts to unravel in the 20th century. So a lot of these Marxists get together, Britt, and they ask the question, why did Marx's revolutions fail? Why did Marx and Engels fail? Why did Lenin fail? Of course, that was 20th century. But and what do we do? How do we reinterpret and reimagine Marx for the 20th century? And their answer was, the reason why Marxism as an economic theory failed was culture. And so a lot of these people get together in Germany, and they come up with a strategy to continue the war against Christianity, the family, and Western civilization as we know it. But the strategy would no longer be riots in the street, burning down Minneapolis, Ferguson, and setting up a police-free zone called Chaz Chop in Seattle. Now, we see some of those insurrections still happening around the country, right? But as a movement, the shift came by swapping out who the victim class was and who the oppressor was. Because remember, the victim was the poor factory worker crushed by capitalistic greed.
Right.
Remember?
Yep.
But now capitalism has just caused the working classes not to revolt, but to thrive. So you can't convince them to be the revolutionaries against the oppressive capitalists. So now the victims, rather than economic victims, they're sexual victims, they're gender victims. The victim oppressor framework is the same. You just swap out the players. And so who used to be the bad guy in Marxism? This is super fascinating and important. But who was the bad guy? It was the capitalists, the super rich people. Now, leftism and wokeism as we know it today cannot even survive without the funding of the left-wing capitalist millionaires and billionaires. So now it's being sustained by and driven forward by
they subverted their own creations,
who they treated in the last century as the oppressor. See, but so there's different players, but the framework is the same. And now
oppressor oppressed.
The oppressor is the normal person who believes in the gender binary. The normal person who believes that babies shouldn't be murdered. The normal person who believes that marriage is a good thing and there's no such thing as gay marriage. It doesn't exist.
Right.
Now it's the normal person whose vocabulary will be policed on the office floor by the HR department and in the classroom and even at that left-wing church. It's the normal person who's now the threat to the inevitable revolution that is coming. And so they get together and they decide that their new strategy is culture. And they launched something in 1925 called the Frankfurt School. A few years later, as Hitler starts to rise, many of the Frankfurt School founders, Britt, some of them are German Jews. So they actually fear Hitler. So they flee. And they move the Frankfurt School to Columbia University in New York City. Back to New York City.
Back to New York.
And they become the founders, they become the fathers of the radical hippie movement and the radical yippie movement. They helped architect the sexual revolution. Frankfurt School members include, either members or second generation discipled by the Frankfurt School. Does that make sense? So the movement, there's the members and then there's the movement who were discipled by the founders. It's all the same thing in my book. But you've got Herbert Marcuse, for example. You know how we talked about how it's all spiritual and how like they're all obsessed with they have to borrow from the verbiage and diction of the very Christendom that they hate in order to discredit it. Herbert Marcuse was popular for saying in his super weird sex book called Eros and Civilization, he said that the way back into the garden is to take another bite of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So commit the original sin again. And then Marcuse mentors and disciples a young woman during the sexual revolution named Angela Davis. She's still alive today. She was one of the first critical race theorists way before BLM. Well, guess who Angela Davis ended up mentoring? Alicia Garza and Patrice Cullors, the co-founders of BLM Incorporated.
BLM.
So are you starting to see this, guys? Like, discipleship is inevitable. If we don't exercise dominion for righteousness by discipling the next generation, the other side will exercise domination through secular pagan discipleship. And they often are far more zealous about their wickedness than Christians have been to stand against it or to promote righteousness. Another Frankfurt School member was Max Horkheimer, who said the revolution will not happen with guns. Rather, it will happen incrementally. Year by year, we will infiltrate your institutions, turning them into Marxist egalitarian something. This eventually leads to Wilhelm Reich, who admitted what they all believed, but was too radical to even be acknowledged by the Frankfurt School, because Wilhelm Reich is really the sexual father of cultural Marxism. There is no Alfred Kinsey without Wilhelm Reich. There's no Kinsey without Wilhelm Reich. Wilhelm Reich spoke, I have multiple of his first editions. He spoke openly about how the way that we destroy the family is by sexualizing children.
Ugh.
And the way that we block their ability to believe in God is by encouraging their sexual play. And he said when children live in accordance with sexual mores and norms, and they respect their father's authority and the family, then they're more likely to believe in God.
The guy that discipled Kinsey said this?
Well, not directly.
The guy who influenced Kinsey.
Yeah. Kinsey picked up right where Reich left off. Wilhelm Reich then said that in order to separate infants or children from their parents and to usurp the father's authority. Back to Kate Millett, How Do We Destroy America? By Destroying the American Patriarch.
Yes.
He talked openly about how the way that we sever that relationship between child and parent is we encourage children to masturbate. And he says it's only when children begin to masturbate and have sex that their belief in God is blocked. When they live in accordance with norms and traditions they're actually waiting till marriage, they're more likely to believe in God. And so he spoke openly about how the best way to block a child's belief in God and the next generation was by encouraging child sex and sexual play in children. So his theories and recommendations were a little bit too radical for Sanger, for Mary Calderon, for Hefner, for Kinsey, for the
Money.
all of the scientific higher organizations that he's largely ignored. His books were burned by the FDA. He spent some time in prison, and yet when you look at Kinsey's ideas, when you look at Sanger's ideas, when you look at the modern comprehensive sexuality education infrastructure with the kind of filth that they put in public schools, it's indiscernible. It's indiscernible from Wilhelm Reich. What they did was they ignored the man and intellectually laundered the ideas.
Yes.
It's
And
the same
it
beliefs.
goes back to the cultural readiness, that the culture wasn't ready for that then. But I was thinking as you were saying that, I'm like, well, that's all in the school textbooks now. Like they're teaching all of those things to little kids, you know. I do want to go real quick because I know that we're wrapping up and we could go on for hours. But you said something that was interesting when you talked about that struggle session, right, with the sisters, and how in order to destroy America, you have to destroy the patriarchy. And then going back to Eden, right, which is what everyone wants to rewrite, upside down it, make the whole thing upside down, twist it all.
Yep.
You have the patriarchy being absent in the fall, right? Because Eve goes out, she takes the fruit, she eats it. Adam was supposed to protect her, be her covering, and then she offers to Adam that fruit and he takes and eats it. So that's the original sin, right? Is you have this whole twisting of what God had created to be good and safe and protective. So connecting that to this whole conversation we've had, because we didn't plan to go here, but just on topic of patriarchy and men involved in the fight to reclaim our republic for Christendom, which you can call that Christian nationalism if you want, but it is connected to abortion. What is your encouragement to young men who we are seeing the trends where young men are coming back to tradition, but you still have a lot of women who are clinging to feminism? So what's your encouragement for this cultural moment right now, given everything you just talked about, how we fell so far off track, and what you see in the beginning as Christians, the divine order of how society stays safe and healthy? I'd love your encouragement for young men and just for the culture projection and where we're going.
How do you know that feminism is demonic? Because the first feminists rewrote the Bible to remove gendered language and the acknowledgement of biblical patriarchy. The first feminists made it very clear that they didn't like the way that God set up family. God set up the man as the leader and the protector. You have to rewrite that. I mean, it's the same thing we've been talking about for the last 30 minutes on this show. I think denying patriarchy is kind of like denying gravity. Like, patriarchy is inevitable. You're either going to have righteous, godly men loving and protecting, or you're going to have wicked, evil men destroying. It's a patriarchy either way. Why does... And I get a lot of these have to define terms. Like, people get so triggered by the term patriarchy. It just means what we're talking about. The Bible, Genesis 1. Christ is the head of the man is the head of the wife, like Christ is the head of the church. If you as a Christian have a problem with that, let's just, if we define patriarchy as like that, man is the head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church. And wives, submit to your husbands. Husbands, love your wives like Christ loved the church, which means freaking die. Okay, so if you have a problem with that, you don't have a problem with Seth Gruber or the White Rose Resistance. You have a problem with the scriptures. That's how the scripture defines the family and sets it up. Why does God walk into the garden and say, "Where are you, Adam?" What a sexist bigot Yahweh was, huh, Britt? Why didn't he say, Adam and Eve,
Yeah.
why, come here? Like, think about that for a second. Now, that does not excuse her, right? Because she still gets the curse, doesn't she? She's still punished. So is Adam. Like, you're going to try to rule over your husband. And by the way, childbirth is going to suck now.
Mm-hmm.
And Adam, work is going to suck.
Mm-hmm.
And curse will be the ground that you work with. Okay. So Adam and Eve, watch this. They both get punished because of sin. So God's not favoring one over the other, right? But when he walks into the garden after the fall, he only calls up the father. He only calls up the man. He only calls up the husband, who was standing right there when she took the bite and handed it to him, and he did nothing.
Mm-hmm.
God holds, while they both got punished, God holds him accountable for doing nothing and allowing it. And so I just had a semi-viral reel on Mark Driscoll's podcast because I said something like, actually, I was quoting Father Christmas to Susan and Lucy.
Yes.
In The Lion, the Witch, and the
Narnia.
Wardrobe. And a lot of the Christian feminists who hated it, I didn't tell them in the comment section because it probably would have made them feel real weird. But I wanted to say, like, I was actually quoting Father Christmas to
C.S.
Susan and
Lewis,
Lucy. But they didn't like this line. But Father Christmas says to Susan and Lucy, who want to join the battle later, and they want weapons. And even though he gives Susan a bow with some arrows, he says, I hope you don't have to use them when women fight. It's not pretty. And I got excoriated as some kind of sexist who hates women for this line. And then I said something along the lines, Britt, of women and families should be involved in fighting any injustice. And by the way, that's the history of justice movements. I have my second to last chapter in my new book, Britt, is on Wilberforce and the Clapham Group. There were so many amazing wives and moms and all this involved with the attempt to abolish slavery in the British colonies. Like, women and families have always been involved in fighting injustice. And I said that in the podcast with Driscoll, but I also said, however, I don't think like the war and battle against Moloch should be solely being led by women with spears screaming, let's go. I said, if women are having to rise up to tear down the high places, that's an indictment on the men who let it stand. And then people were screaming at me, yeah, but what about Deborah? It's like, right. The Lord brings up Deborah after 3 or 4 decades of men failing to protect, provide, and to worship in accordance with how the Lord said to do. The Lord will raise up a woman to do for him what his sons should have done to their shame. And so I said this, and I just got completely excoriated. It was interesting looking at the comments, though. It's probably 75 pro and 25 against. And all these women saying, as a woman, I 100% agree with everything Seth just said. So I think Christian feminism might not be on life support yet, but it might be close. So I think that's great. So I think most women hate something they've never seen modeled well.
That's a good way. I think that's a great way to put it.
I think Christian women who hate patriarchy, I know this. These are the clips that get taken out and that give me trouble. But I want to say, how's your relationship with your father? So most Christian women who hate the term patriarchy, and this whatever, I don't even care anymore. They either probably had a really weak father, so detached, emotionless, removed, weak. Or they had a violent, really mean father. Rarely does a Christian woman hate patriarchy, whatever that even means today, when she had a really loving, emotionally available, present, and physically and metaphysically strong father. Rarely does a Christian woman hate patriarchy when she had that growing up.
Yeah, I think that's well said.
And the last thing I'd say on that is nature is ever the vindicator. So if you question everything I just said, then why is it that study after study has been done on this, Britt. Why is it that when a mom and a wife meet Jesus and repents and acknowledges Jesus as the king and surrenders her life to the Lord, why is it that the studies show such a small percentage of times when the husband and the children follow? And then why is it, on the inverse, that when a father or a husband repents of his sin, throws himself before the foot of the king, and commits his entire identity and self to the great lion, why is it that in over 90% of cases, the wife and the children follow him to the foot of the cross?
Hmm.
Why is that? Why do all the studies show that? Why? Because denying patriarchy is kind of like denying gravity.
Gravity. Yeah. No, that's
So,
so well said.
so I'm
So
thankful for all the women warriors who fight abortion, but oftentimes they've risen up in a gap, in a chasm left open by weak men who should have been leading the charge.
well, that is the story of Deborah. It's an interesting story because I hear that a lot. But in the case of the story of Deborah, it was to shame Israel for not doing what they should have. Even her song, it wasn't supposed to be glory to the woman in battle. As much as I love the Deborah story, I think it's incredible. But it was to shame the men for not stepping up. I mean, that's how the whole story is portrayed, and a lot
Right.
of like theologians, as they have teased out that story, it wasn't to say, yeah, go woman, be female
Slay
warrior.
queen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was to actually shame men for not doing what men were designed to do, which is to protect women. And so I think that's so well said. I do, like, as we close out here, I want you to just encourage any young men who may be listening to this or will catch wind of this. We've seen that the recent polling shows a noticeable uptick in 18 to 29-year-olds identifying
Mhm.
as pro-life, which is an 8 to 11-point jump in just a few years. Praise the Lord. That's awesome. You've been on the front lines for a real long time in this, but just talk to the young men who are told, you don't have a uterus, you don't get to talk. But we're seeing this uptick of young men saying, no, this is wrong, and I'm pro-life. I'm a traditionalist. I'm coming back to Christendom. What would you say to those young men who are told that they don't belong on the front lines, that this is the woman's fight?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I've been involved in fighting abortion in some capacity since I was 18. Um, I'll turn 35 this summer. Um, and most men do not do anything to contend against or tear down this great evil. And it's true. Most of the pro-life movement has been largely feminine for a long, long time. And I think that's starting to shift and change. Additionally, with Gen Z young men, they're also going back to church at record level
Yeah.
numbers in, like, I think numbers we haven't seen in even like our parents' generation
It's
a
pretty
really
incredible.
long time. And
Yeah.
it's pretty incredible and absolutely
hmm
amazing. Unfortunately, Gen Z women are not going
They are
back to
not.
church in the same numbers, but they are
Uh-uh.
rushing to OnlyFans in record level numbers. The last report I saw was, and don't quote me on this, but I did find a source saying this. I just don't know how valid it is, but numbers are being thrown out that somewhere around 1 in 10 Gen Z women are on OnlyFans,
Oh my gosh.
which is pretty wild and sick to think about. And we do live in the most pornified generation in human history, which additionally emasculates men
hmm
because it convinces them that they can have all of the physical tinglings that God designed, but outside of the context of a covenanted marriage.
hmm
Never until recent memory have people been able to walk around with the entire world of pornography in their pocket.
hmm
Um, this is again a podcast for another time, but we actually have to ban pornography.
Yep.
That's actually a very loving thing to do, because a man will have as many masters as he has vices, to quote Augustine from the City of God. And
Hmm.
so by promoting vice, the regime promotes slavery, which can then be fashioned into a form of political control. So yes, young men, porn is a weapon wielded against you, and it will destroy you. And by the way, this is all connected. Why? Because you cannot tear down the idols of a culture that you have carefully erected in your own living room.
That's a word right there.
So if you want to join me, if you want to respond even to our wonderful sister here and her encouragement for young men to join the fight, don't you dare step foot on this battlefield until you have slain your own dragons first. Don't you dare step foot on this battlefield. I don't want you on this battlefield if you're looking at pornography every night, every week. You're useless. You cannot rule yourself. You cannot govern yourself. You have no control over your desires and your base appetites. And you're in no position to wield a weapon against demons who always sexualize a community before they murder babies. Satan and his minions come with sex first because it destroys the ability to stand against everything that comes after that.
Mhm.
So for young men who want to fight evil, praise God, that's a godly, innate desire that's been hardwired into your DNA. Praise God. Learn to slay your own dragons in your own home and on your own phone before you enter the culture war against baby killing, baby murder, feminism, transgenderism, gay surrogacy, IVF, third-party reproductive technology, and calling pedophiles minor attractive persons. You will be impotent and ineffective in that battle if you have not slain the dragon of pornography. So if you need to put your mother on the Covenant Eyes browsing history report, do it. If you need to put your mother-in-law on your browsing history report that gets sent out once a week, do it. I have a shirt at Gruber Wear. That's right, we have Gruber Wear over at White Rose.
I love
And
it.
one of them says, my mother-in-law gets my Covenant Eyes reports, thanks to Seth Gruber.
Mm.
Do whatever it takes before you enter this battlefield. Secondly, don't listen to Christian feminists because they're suckling at the teat of the serpent while lecturing the church on what biblical fidelity looks like. This is called syncretism, and young men have to be very careful and aware of it because in the last few years, we haven't been seeing a patriarchy so much as we've been seeing a matriarchy.
Mhm.
And when women rule, when men rule apart from Christ, it's Andrew Tate,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
Or Nick Fuentes.
Yes, Nick Fuentes and Andrew Tate.
When
Yep.
women rule apart from Christ, or sometimes even just in general, they might misplace the victim.
Hmm.
They might show more empathy and love where there needs to be more justice and truth. And that's part of women's nature. That's a really beautiful thing. But what's the downside of men ruling and reigning when they haven't ruled themselves first? They can be assholes.
Hmm.
They can care so much about truth and justice that there's no love. So we all have pitfalls when you enter like a bloody fight and war against the kind of things that are manifesting in our culture, Britt. But young men have been silenced and silent for a long time because they've let the screaming feminists tell them to be quiet. And nowhere is that more evident than on the abortion issue. No uterus, no opinion. Shut up. My body,
Mhm.
my choice. Who are you? You're trying to control women's body. Why are you so obsessed with women's bodies? Why are you so obsessed with my genitalia, huh?
Yeah.
This pussy punches back. Here's a
Mhm.
vagina hat. Like all the kind of expressions. Sorry, that's what they put on
Mhm.
their own merch. All these kind of expressions. Men have just let that happen. They just completely shut up. It's just like, I don't want to deal with a Karen feminist. And so they've just shut up. And I'm starting to see that shifting. I'm starting
Yeah.
to see young Gen Z men, not just like courageous, but like fearless
Mhm.
against the spirit of the age. And these, I think, actually fundamentally spiritual principalities. And so I'm super grateful for that. Thirdly, you need to read a lot of books. C.S. Lewis said, the only palliative is to keep the clean sea breeze of the century blowing through our minds. And so if you want to identify error, if you want to correct error, if you want to identify falsehoods and evil, if you want to identify false doctrines that are masquerading under new wrappings, you need to read books by dead authors.
Hmm.
Yes, I think I've written some good stuff. That's fine. There's lots of people. You should read Nancy Pearcey. You should read Carrie Gress, Oz Guinness, Katie
Mhm.
Faust. um, George Grant, Doug Wilson.
C.S. Lewis.
Um, I was naming
Right.
living
Oh, yeah,
authors.
the
But
livings.
so there's some great living ones you should read, but you should read a lot of dead authors.
Mhm.
The Bible talks about the sons of Issachar, and all it tells us
Mhm.
is that they were men who understood the times they lived in, and so they knew what Israel ought to do.
Mhm.
So if you want to know how to live and what to do, you have to understand the times you live in, and you can't do that without reading old books. So that would be another one. And then, yeah, don't wait to get married. I mean, don't marry a feminist, obviously. But try to find someone of the opposite gender. Make sure, try to find a way to confirm they're the opposite gender.
Yeah.
Some weird stories I read recently.
Especially if you're out here in California.
Yeah, exactly.
Good luck.
And then,
Godspeed.
as long as that other opposite gendered person loves Jesus and is humble and wants to learn and grow together, then don't wait. Get married and
Mhm.
start spitting out a bunch of dragon slayers.
Yeah.
We need the next generation to outbreed the pagans.
Mhm.
That's one of the ways that we'll win in the end.
And we have an advantage because they are killing their babies and,
Yeah, Right Wing Watch just pulled a clip of me saying that they were. I think there's like a post millennial theocrat on staff at Right Wing Watch because they always clip my like most banger, like better than my own team does. I'm like, thanks for putting my best content that I create in
I
front of
love
like
it.
X. I really
Millions.
appreciate that.
It's good. I just have such like a burning in my heart for young men, especially with the loss of Charlie Kirk, because he was such a mentor. And I do think that that's the correlation between this uptick we're seeing with
Oh,
these young
100%.
men, and it's just such a loss to not have him.
100%.
So that's
Yeah,
where
Charlie was
there's
booked to speak at The Last Stand in June, and so we're
oh.
dedicating the whole film and book to him.
Mm.
So for people that wanna read that, see the film, come to the festival, it's thelaststand.com, and, yeah.
Yeah, it's such a loss, but there's definitely a change in the guards, and so I am encouraged, and I'm so thankful for the work that you're doing, and on behalf of women, I am a strong personality. I go out with a sword,
Yeah, you do.
and I also submit fully to my husband, who was my teenage sweetheart, and I
That's
love to
awesome.
pieces. And I think that there's just this idea that if you are submissive, you wear an apron barefoot and you bake
Right,
sourdough, but you
right.
can there's also a both. I fight for my
Totally.
beautiful kids, but under the covering of my husband and under the blessing of him. And I want more men in the fight. So on behalf of someone who is engaged in the fight, I want the men ahead of us. Like I
Yeah,
want the men on the front lines. We're okay, doing what we're doing here, but I want more of the next generation of men to step up and
yeah,
step in and go ham,
yeah.
against the demonic. So I'm thankful that
I love
that
that, Britt,
you
yeah.
are leading, and I'm
One of my favorite things that Chesterton ever said, that's one of the people that your listeners should
Chesterton.
read,
Oh,
but
GK.
he said so many things. Yeah, Gilbert Keith Chesterton, but
Mhm.
he said, "The true soldier fights not because he hates what is in front of him, but because he loves what is behind him."
Behind him.
He
Mhm.
said, "God chooses ordinary men for fatherhood to accomplish his extraordinary plan." He
Mm.
said, "The most extraordinary thing in all the world is an ordinary man and an ordinary woman and their ordinary children."
That makes me wanna cry right at the end. It's so honest and true. Um, man,
So,
this has been
we have
such
to
a
fight for normal,
We
actually.
do. We have to fight for normal, and that's, I was just talking to my amazing producer Lindsay about this, and we'll wrap up here, and you can share all the things about how people can find you. But I was just talking to Lindsay, my producer, about Epstein and the darkness, and Candace Owens
Right.
going crazy, and just all the things that. And if you're still following Candace Owens, like Lord have mercy, please, just reconsider because there's just so much demonic right now, where it's like you can't keep up. There's so much. There's so many rabbit holes. There are so many, like you said, dragons to slay. And I was telling Lindsay that even with the Epstein stuff and just all the rabbit holes and files being released and
Mhm.
trying to figure out where to land on all of it, it's like at the end of the day, we have to disciple our kids and love our husbands. And that changes things because a strong family has always been that center point that the enemy focuses on throughout
Yeah, but
history
we all
because
have to do that.
there's so much power in it.
Yeah, we
And
all
I
have to
think
do that, though. It's not enough to just have 10% of Christians doing
no,
it,
we all
which
have
means
to.
that the pulpits have to wake up, actually, is
Mhm.
what that means.
But you
pulpits
wanna
have to
you
wake
wanna
up.
see abortion go away, you wanna see strong families, you wanna see husbands rise to the occasion and actually step onto the battlefield against the demonic. I think that it comes back to the family and
Right.
building really strong families. So,
By the way, you know how they joke about eating babies?
I don't know if they're joking.
Right, exactly. Do you wanna know why?
You're go ahead and tell me.
Well,
No, I
it's
don't wanna know, but I
it
do need to know.
it's not a coincidence. It's not random. It's not disconnected from everything else we've been discussing. It's central, it's spiritual. Um, Britt, what's the central rallying cry to express the pro-choice position that's screamed at rallies for the last 50 years? What do
My
they
body
scream?
my body, my choice.
Yeah, this is my body.
Mhm,
If you're a Christian and you don't go to Andy Stanley's church, so
mm,
you're not unhitched from the Old Testament, his
yep.
phrase, not mine, and you actually read the Bible and you're a Christian and you hear the phrase, "This is my body." You as a Christian your mind should immediately hear, "Broken for you. Take and eat in remembrance of me, for I will not eat of this bread or drink of this vine until I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom." So if their central rallying cry and phrase that they've been screaming for over 50 years, Britt, to express the pro-choice position is, "This is my body," is to quote the words of the Savior at the Last Supper and the First Communion. And they openly advertise this. The Satanic Temple files lawsuits against pro-life states, and they say that abortion is one of their sacramental rituals, and so they have
Mm,
the religious liberty to that. Jeanette Paris wrote a book in 1991 called The Sacrament of Abortion. The abortion center outside of Portland, it was called the Peace, Joy, Love Clinic. They renamed it to Lilith Center,
wow.
who in Jewish folklore was Adam's other wife, who
Yep.
goes around causing miscarriages and
Mhm.
preying on babies. Okay, so like back to, if someone tells you who they are, believe them. So if their central phrase to express child sacrifice and baby killing in the same location that Christ entered human history in to redeem mankind from their sins is, "This is my body," then abortion says, "This is my body. I break you, baby, for me." But Christ says, "No, this is my body. I break my body for you." So if this is sort of the secular satanic sacrament that borrows phraseology from the First Communion, where his body is broken, his blood is shed for the forgiveness of sins, then just complete the sentence, Brad. Just complete the sentence. "This is my body broken for you. Take and eat.
Mhm.
Eat. Eat babies. Take and eat. Broken for you." Abortion says, "This is my body. I break you, baby, for me." It's a demonic parody.
Mhm.
It's the inversion, because Satan can't create theologically. All he can do is invert, pervert, copycat, and mock that which God has already made and declared good. The number one joke I get from pro-abortion trolls in my inboxes, in my
Oh, I
DMs
see them all the time.
for years
Mhm.
is jokes about eating fetuses.
Yep.
That's not
Mhm.
a coincidence. Finish the sentence. "This is my body." Okay, that now means abortion. Broken, literally in pieces. If the baby's ripped apart, take and eat.
Yeah, it's so
That's a
it's so
demonic.
dark.
That's actually really demonically consistent, actually.
Mhm.
So yeah, if killing babies is healthcare, then selling them is capitalism. And maybe the fact that we have world leaders and politicians in the highest levels of the government who have participated in and have protected purchasing and raping babies is because we mainstreamed killing them years ago. Anyways.
Ugh. I always leave these conversations with you, Seth, where I'm like, I don't even have words. I have to go digest everything that we just discussed for a long time. But it's so good, and what you're doing is so important and so worthy. And you're just exposing all the dark corners and going to battle. So again, thank you for your
Yeah.
continued work on all of this. And I am encouraged, even though so much of what we just talked about is so dark, I am so encouraged to see the younger generation trending men the
Yeah.
men. We need to get the women on board. But there's something happening with the young men, and I get really
Amen.
excited about seeing that and seeing you leading them. So thank you for stepping into that, especially with the loss of Charlie. I'm thankful for good shepherds like you. And as we close out, why don't you share how people can find you, follow you? And I know we talked about the new book and the new video, but go ahead and pitch that again. And then all the information will be in the show notes so you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
go find it all
Yeah, the
here.
Seth Gruber Show, 2 episodes a week, YouTube, Rumble, anywhere you listen to podcasts, and Real Life Network. And Britt, I hope you and the family come out to The Last Stand, June 5th and 6th. It's a Friday
Look,
evening,
I've been
Saturday.
trying to get to all of your things for a long time. I owe you a yes invitation to one of these invitations.
It'll be a powerful
Yes,
lineup.
it's going to be great.
TheLastStand.com for people that want to come. TheLastStand.com. Powerful lineup of speakers: Frank Turek, Ali Beth Stuckey, Steve Dace, Abby Johnson, Rob McCoy. I'm leaving out some. And then the premiere of the film, the red carpet premiere of the film on June 6th at the end of the day in Denver, Colorado. And then our website is just thewhiterose.life. That'll actually connect you everywhere. But thewhiterose.life. And we're a Christian ministry. We have resistance chapters all around the country mobilizing the local church to shut down abortion mills and get in gospel trouble in our communities. And we just launched a
So
C4 as
good.
well. So for people
Yeah.
who like to burn cash, for those who like to get involved in
Support.
political fights, which is a synonym for burning cash, we just launched White Rose Action, and then our film and book, The Last Stand, are coming out at the festival. So if people want to get involved, they can go there. We have an app. And anyone at $35 a month or more can join the app with our courses, curriculum, live trainings, pro-life masterclass, activism training, role-playing pro-life, pro-choice
Mhm.
debates, the films, all the conference talks. It's just a wealth of resources as well. So I do need help. So people that want to support monthly, just go to thewhiterose.life.
You're awesome, Seth. Thanks again for joining
Thanks,
us.
Brent.
It's always such a pleasure.
Amen.